We were really due for a fun weekend, and boy did we get one. The Phantoms swept Muskegon, we re-debuted the show to a much greater reaction than we could have imagined, and the Penguins took over first place in the Metro Division. We're Penguins fans, so that matters. If you're Andrew Goldman, a longtime Capitals fan, not so much. Welcome to episode 22 of the Dump and Chase podcast. My name is Sam Olmstead, and as always, I'm joined by my smarter half, Justin Irwin. So there hasn't been too much to complain about in the past 5 days, has there?
No, not a whole lot. I guess the only thing really we can complain about is shit. I have nothing to complain about. Yeah.
So in this episode, we'll go over last weekend's 2-game sweep of the Lumberjacks, and we'll take a look at Phantoms defenseman Artyom Borshyov. And since we had so much fun last week with our interview with trainer Ted Rendinell, we've decided to keep the train rolling. So later on in this episode, you'll get to hear our interview with the voice of the Phantoms, Matt Lipcsak. So starting off, we're going to take a quick look at some team news. We saw Colin Purcell return from injury, but did not see any ice time over the weekend. We also saw the return of Nikolai Jensen as well, which, as the Phantoms have been a little thin on the blue line, he was definitely a welcome sight back in the lineup.
Yeah, definitely good to get him back. It seems every year we end up a little bit thin on the blue line. Maybe not as bad this year as some other years, but it's better to have a guy like him in the lineup, so glad to have him back.
And we also got news earlier this week that Josh DeLuca has made his college commitment to Bowling Green, which is also where Phantoms alum Sam Craigs currently calls home. So congrats to Josh, and he'll be right down the road from Ben Schoen's hometown, so not too bad a company to keep up in Northwest Ohio.
No, there's been quite a few Phantoms that have gone the Bowling Green route, so definitely a good university. We wish Josh the best of luck in the future.
All right, so Justin, we saw this past weekend the Phantoms put 2 complete games together in a row. Offense, defense, special teams, and all the little things that go along with it. A 3-1 win on Friday and a 5-4 win on Saturday that, if you watch the game, really wasn't as close as the score indicated. What was your overall takeaway from last weekend?
Definitely a lot more committed team, I'd say. I thought they played good again against Dubuque, just did not show up on the scoreboard. They kept that going. It definitely showed up on the scoreboard against Muskegon. Muskegon shortened their bench on Saturday, gave us a little bit of a run, but yeah, I think we had them from the get-go. So
thanks to this past weekend, the Phantoms move up to 5th place in the Eastern Conference. Could have moved up to 4th, but Dubuque didn't want to help us out there. Right now, sitting in 5th, 2 points ahead of Muskegon, and trailing 4th place Green Bay by 1 point, and 3rd place Team USA by 3. Now, Team USA has trended downward, mainly the U17s, as the U18s have been away for the past month or so. And the interesting thing to me in all of this is, when you look at the West, they haven't been as strong this season as we've seen before. In past years, the Phantoms would be sitting in 2nd or 3rd in the East, but when you looked at their point total, they wouldn't even be in the top 6 in the West. I kind of wonder if this has anything to do with the import goalie penalty. Took effect last year. If a team has an import goalie, it counts as 2 import players. Yeah, but with that taking effect last season and then coming into this season, do you think that's causing more parity in the league than we've seen in the past?
Yeah. Scoring is up, I think. Goaltending probably isn't as incredible as it was, say, 3 years ago. But, when half the league was an import goalie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, we look a little bit more like the BCHL now, kind of more of a shooter's league. If that said, there are some really good goaltenders in the league.
But as compared to past years, you're not seeing like the astronomically high save percentages that we've seen. You're not seeing the ridiculously low goals against averages that we've seen. It seems like a lot of those numbers are more middling than anything compared to the past.
Yeah, I don't think at this point in time there's any goaltender who's got a goals against below 2.0. Oh, actually, looking at it now, there's one, Dubuque. Yeah. Go figure. You look in the top 10 save percentage, there's at least one goaltender in the top 10 that's below 900. Again, shooters league. We've got some really good offensive talent in the league right now.
Now, moving on from goaltending for a minute here, at least. I mean, in the past, we've harped on the fact of, the lack of offense from the team other than Trevor Kuntar. Trevor had a goal on Saturday, which was his first since January 11th. In the meantime, little by little, it seems like the rest of the team has started to step up. Ben Schoen is starting to look like the Ben Schoen we saw at the end of last season. The series at Dubuque didn't go well on the scoreboard, but I think we've seen little by little the confidence of this team rising. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. They look a little bit looser out there, not so wound tight. I think there's been a few tweaks in the lines that have definitely helped. So, yeah, definitely we're getting productivity out of them. So we'll see if that turns into consistency.
Okay, so jumping back into goaltending here. So after the injury to Colin Purcell a month ago, we've seen Dominic Basse carrying the workload, but not having much choice with emergency backups pretty much being the norm. Since the game on January 17th, when he took over for the injured Purcell in the third period, Basse has started the Phantoms' last 10 games. Now, Purcell did return to the lineup last weekend, but Basse was still the starter. Now, to me, that speaks volumes as to how comfortable the team seems to be with Basse in goal right now. He's obviously in turn for, to get a blow, to take a game off, rest up a little bit. But they still had him start last weekend. What has changed in his game that you've seen in the last month that's put him into the position he's in now?
I think the most obvious thing we've seen is it looks like his rebound control has got a lot better. It seems like he's tracking the puck a lot better. He doesn't suck it up right away into his equipment somehow. He's falling on it a lot quicker. That really helps. And I've always said, he kind of looks like he plays better the more active, the more scrambling he is. And he's, obviously been feeling it out there. You see him, making the big saves, and sometimes it looks a little bit scary. The puck stays out somehow. We just would like to see him maybe not go so far out to play it sometimes.
I mean, if you look at the Muskegon series this last weekend, for the most part, the Phantoms, dominated playing those two games. Muskegon still got some pretty good grade A chances, and Basse, if he wasn't playing the way he was playing, those games, even though I don't think Muskegon deserved to win either one, they could have, maybe pulled a point or two out over last weekend.
Yeah, and that's one of the big keys, I think, last weekend was Muskegon got 0 points in Youngstown. With the race being so close right now, that's just huge. And yeah, like you nailed it. A lot of that was Basse, especially Saturday. Muskegon didn't dress a couple of guys that, maybe weren't pulling their weight on Friday. They looked like they had a lot more energy. We still stopped them, so.
Okay, so now we get to the fun part. Last weekend, for the first time, I got to meet the Phantoms play-by-play announcer, Matt Lipcsak, to talk to him about appearing on the podcast. And needless to say, I was absolutely blown away by how candid he was just in that short little conversation, which made me all the more excited for this interview. We got to talk to Matt about his history with the team, the work he puts in and week out, and his opinions on the season's roster. So, without further ado, sit back and listen to our interview with the voice of the Phantoms, Matt Lipcsak. And the tape is rolling. We are honored to introduce our next guest to the podcast. If you watch Phantoms home games on Hockey TV or listen to the broadcast on Western Reserve Radio, you will instantly recognize this voice. I am, of course, talking about the voice of the Youngstown Phantoms, Mr. Matt Lipcsak. Matt, welcome to the Dump and Chase podcast, and thank you for taking time out from talking about the Phantoms to talk with us about the Phantoms.
Good evening, Sam and Justin, and also don't forget that the games are also available on tape delay on Armstrong Cable. I just submitted them to Armstrong yesterday on what seemed to be a day off for almost everybody else, but usually I think Tuesdays and Thursdays are when they try to put them on, so definitely you want to stay tuned for all of that on Armstrong Cable if you have it locally in the Youngstown area.
So we'll jump right in here. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be the play-by-play guy for the Phantoms?
Absolutely. So I started as the basically was the press box intern back the first year of the team in the 09-10 season. I just graduated from YSU. I'm from Elwood City, Pennsylvania. Graduated from Riverside High School in 2004, and as I said, from YSU in 2009. And I got a phone call one day from Matt Geica, who was the first voice of the Phantoms, just completely out of the blue. He said, hey, we're starting a USHL hockey team in Youngstown, and I called up to the sports information department at YSU to see if there was anybody who was interested in working in the press box with me. And Trevor Parks, the sports information director at YSU, gave Matt my name, and as they say, the rest is history.
I started following the Phantoms, I think, the 2010-11 season. We've been through quite a few play-by-play guys before you jumped in. Was there anybody who was a kind of a big influence, a teacher?
I'd like to think that I learned a little bit from all of my partners, Matt Geica, Bart Logan, Everett Fitzhugh, Ryan Schwepfinger. I'd like to think that I learned a little bit from each and every one of them. Anybody that's listened to me call a game, I think we can all agree that probably one of the biggest influences on my style is probably Mike Lang. I grew up listening to Penguin games more so than watching, just because I wanted to hear the next goofy thing he was going to say when the Penguins scored a goal. So I tried to, come up with a few goofy things of my own. And I think I've done an okay job so far, at least. Nobody's ever going to, completely imitate the Hall of Famer, but we're going to do our best.
So, like, for you, like, what kind of prep work goes into a game? When you show up to the arena, what is your routine leading up to game time?
So my routine usually starts around 1 or 2 o'clock on game day, at least, specifically to game day. And that's when I text Coach Patterson and ask him what the lines are going to be that day, because one of the things that I have done, because it's something that the broadcaster always used to do, is make the line chart for the team. So that's one of my duties. And I do that whether the team is at home or on the road. I will always text Brad, usually about 1 or 2 o'clock, depending on what I have going on at my other job that day, so that I can get the line chart done. Then I will usually, take the line chart, email it out to the staff, and say, hey, make sure I didn't screw anything up. And from there, if everything's good, the line chart will get printed. And I will drive from my working location over to Youngstown. I'll usually stop and pick up the food for the press box along the way. And then I usually get to the arena about, 5 o'clock for a 7:05 puck drop. From there, I'll go set up the press booth and get down to the locker room to grab the starting lineups from each team, assuming that the visiting team has arrived at that point and that I have their line charts. And then from there, after starting lineups, it's do an audio check with Hockey TV, make sure that everything is coming in clear, and then hang out until game time. And then we kind of go from there. Throughout the week, I will, especially for home games, I will compile my game notes, which I've been posting on Twitter this year, which a lot of fans really seem to enjoy. I've been getting quite a few retweets and favorites out of that. So, a lot of work goes into compiling those game notes, researching trends and history and looking into the numbers. And that's something that I've always enjoyed doing. I actually started out with my love of sports statistics back in probably 7th grade, when I became the varsity stat keeper for the basketball team at Riverside High School. And from there, the head basketball coach was also the JV baseball coach. That got me into baseball statistics. And, just kind of my love for numbers kind of took off from there. I actually probably should have been a sports information intern at YSU instead of being the manager for the women's basketball team. I wouldn't take back my 5 years hanging out with the girls for anything in the world, but probably the sports information department is where I should have been.
Now, see, that's something you and me have in common. I mean, as far as just hockey knowledge in general, that's Justin has that all over me day in and day out. I'm more the numbers guy when it comes to this kind of stuff. So much so that I just, some of these goofy requests I'll get from Justin, be like, hey, look up this number. Yeah, and honestly, and in most part, a lot of times that's more fun for me than, well, at least I would say the most fun for me in any prep work I do for a show.
Yeah, and that's really been a big help to me.
We still haven't worked out the team record for when they're wearing those 10th anniversary jerseys. I mean, I know it's not good, but we haven't figured out the exact record for those yet.
Well, I mean, I guess all we really have to do is flip through the highlight films on YouTube, and it would be pretty easy to compile. I don't think they've worn them more than 5 times.
They haven't worn them recently, I know that.
Don't get me wrong, they're beautiful jerseys. I absolutely love them.
They are, but they've got some bad juju attached to them because the record wearing them has not been good this year.
I would be interested to look back through the years at some of the Phantom specialty jersey records, because I know, especially with the blue Phantoms alternates that were modeled off of the Pittsburgh Penguins Winter Classic jerseys, I know a record in those was absolutely atrocious.
It's just one of those strange things in sports that it seems like it shouldn't be a thing, but it ends up being a thing.
Well, I mean, also look at the and this is something we joke about in the front office, is what, the Phantoms record when there's anything going on after the game, like a autograph party or a post game skate. It just seems like, our winning percentage in those games, maybe 25%, maybe. It's I'm probably making more of it than it actually is. It just, one of those weird things that shouldn't mean anything, but it does.
Well, you mentioned that actually leads a little bit into my next question. So after every home game, you come downstairs out of the booth, you'll do a post-game interview with Coach Brad.
Yes.
Now, I've been in those autograph lines after a loss. I've, done those post-game skates after a loss. After a particularly bad game, do you dread having to interview Coach Brad?
I never dread having to interview Brad. He makes my life so easy, and I have told him this on several occasions. He will do his best to answer any question that I ask him, no matter how dumb it is, no matter how poorly I phrase it. He can talk. God bless Brad Patterson. He has the gift of gab when he needs to, and he just makes my job so easy. I never dread having to interview him. I feel bad sometimes maybe having to ask certain questions, but I never dread having to interview Brad. I think he understands that, I have a job to do. And I think he also understands that, answering questions after a bad game is also part of his job as well. I'd like to think that, he does enjoy our conversations, and it's not like pulling teeth. I certainly never have that impression from him. But yeah, it's really not something that I ever worry about.
Okay, so let's say the Phantoms have a bad game, they have a bad weekend. Nothing's going right, the crowd is completely dead. Is it hard for you to keep your energy level up in those situations?
You have to think yes and no. I do get a lot of my energy from the team and what goes on the ice. I almost can't pay attention to the crowd because, I don't have a color guy. If I had a color guy, I guess that would probably be more of their responsibility, paying attention to what's going on in the crowd. My main focus is what's going on the ice. I can honestly say, I think the last time that I actually paid attention to what was going on in the crowd is last year. My nephew Colin came to a game, and he got picked to play the junk in the trunk game during one of the media timeouts.
Okay.
So I think that was the last time I paid attention to any of it, because there's just so much else going on. I run the in-game Twitter for us as well, and you can imagine how difficult it is to try to type and call the game at the same time. I mean, there will be periods when I have to stop talking for 15 or 20 seconds so that I can update the Twitter when somebody has scored a goal, just to try to keep things moving along. And I actually have a pretty good system going now where hockey TV lags, maybe a good 15, 20 seconds behind real time.
Oh, more than that.
Well, I'm giving them credit. But I can actually use screen capture to make a GIF of the goals and get them out on Twitter. That's something that's been requested of me this year. And so far, I've had pretty good success at capturing the goals and then, drop them into Adobe Premiere, cut them down to less than, I think, 7.5 seconds to get a higher quality GIF, and throw them up on Twitter the next chance I get.
We've had times with Hockey TV where Justin will actually travel up to the game in Plymouth, and he'll be giving live updates, and I'll be watching on Hockey TV at home, and he'll be tweeting stuff out like 5-10 seconds before it happens on my screen. I almost have to ignore his Twitter feed during a game, or I know what happens before it happens.
And I'm not that fast to type, so yeah, it's pretty bad.
Another little running joke, you mentioned the junk in the trunk. Another little running joke we've had about that is, whatever we see up on the screen in the arena, that's what anybody watching Hockey TV is seeing.
Correct.
And anytime junk in the trunk comes up, it always makes us laugh because, somebody's sitting in Madison or they're sitting in Dubuque and they're watching this game, and all of a sudden there's these kids with tissue boxes with ping pong balls in them with no audio and no context to what is going on, and then get to watch this for like 60 seconds.
Well, I think that's one of the easier games that we do to try to understand. But, obviously stuff like trivia or karaoke or something like that, people are going to be watching. They're going to have no idea what's going on at all. But that's because our, Western Reserve radio feed goes out over Hockey TV instead of the in-arena audio.
To me, it was the game where they swung the ball dangling from the crotch area to try to knock bottles over. That just doesn't look good with no audio.
Hey, I love our promo team. They come up with some of the most exotic and genuinely fun looking things. So I give all the credit in the world to them because I don't know that I have that much creativity in my entire body. And some of our promo team members, they have all that creativity in their little fingers. So I give them all the credit in the world to try to come up with all the different things that, try to keep the fans entertained there in the arena, because that's the name of the game, is entertainment. So again, all the credit in the world to our promo team. I love those guys.
That may create a new category for them. Come up with something that will entertain the home crowd, but will confuse the living daylights out of anybody watching on Hockey TV.
Challenge accepted.
That might be a fun little game for them to play. Now, as long as you've been up in the booth, have you ever had a puck come up that way?
Absolutely, I have.
Maybe just barely missing a laptop that may or may have not have been new?
Absolutely, I have. I think it was January 27th, maybe, like 2 years ago. It was during pregame warm-ups, and I was chilling up there in the booth, minding my own business, and all of a sudden there's this thwack on the wall right next to me. I'm looking all around, and then I turn around, and there's a puck sitting down on the ground that had missed my head by maybe 2 or 3 feet and missed my laptop by about the same. The laptop that I have is not team issued. It's my own personal laptop. It was a birthday present from my wife, and yeah, I stood up and started screaming and making arm gestures down at the guys on the ice. And of course, they don't know what happened, but yeah, so there has been one puck up in the booth. At least they got close enough to my computer. And that is a trick because, where I sit there in 207 in the, I guess it'd be the corner closest to center ice, I'm still protected by meshing directly in front of me. So you have to hit the crossbar and have it go over the meshing, but then up over all of the seats in the bowl and up to the second row of the press box. So you have to imagine that this puck had to travel 100, 150 feet after hitting the crossbar.
Now, I may or may not have talked to your old booth buddy, Sean Stewart, before this interview, and he may or may not have told me to ask you about the puck coming up into the booth.
Yeah, I was not happy that day, and I'm scrolling back through my Facebook feed as we talk to try to find it, because I usually share it on the day that it happens, but I can't seem to find it at the moment. But I'm pretty sure it was January, and I don't think it was the first year I had the job. I think it was the second, which would be the 17-18 season, I believe.
Yeah, well, we thought we were safe behind the glass, so...
Yeah, that didn't work out for us too well. That was the game a couple months ago where we had the glass kind of come in on us.
Hey, John Larkin is not the hero we need. He's the hero we deserve.
Exactly. Because that glass was heavy.
Very.
I believe it. That I've never tried to pick a pane of glass up, but it also kind of makes me wonder how, when it's that heavy, players manage to break it.
Well, it wasn't so much that it broke; it just kind of came out of the stanchions and kind of twisted around on us and started falling backwards. But most games the glass kept us safe. That time that could have caused some damage. So it's pretty much general knowledge. The USHL is never really that forthcoming with information. This season, it seems to be worse than ever, especially from the standpoint of the fans. How much do you rely on other play-by-play guys in the league to get caught up on a team that's coming to town?
Ever since we stopped doing the Inside the Glass podcast, honestly, not at all. There will usually be some initial conversation at the beginning of the week. Hey, do you need an updated roster? Things of that nature. Can I send you the line chart before the game? Just to make, because, since I do the line chart, I have to find somebody at the visiting, well, I guess the visiting, or we're the visiting team, somebody at that arena to send the line chart to.
Okay.
So usually the play-by-play guy is my main point of contact to make sure that it gets printed and disseminated throughout the arena. But I mean, I'm pretty good friends with the Muskegon broadcaster, Scott Bradford. I get along pretty well with Tim in Waterloo, and trying to think who else. Pete up in USA. I know most of the Eastern Conference guys pretty well. Obviously we see them a couple times a year, but it's not like there's any big, huge conversation or anything about what's going on. If somebody's in the booth that game, we might chat a little bit beforehand, but as the years go on and fewer teams travel their broadcaster, it's unfortunately, it's not something that I get a lot of. So I have to depend on my own research to see what's going on. And as we're talking, I just found my post. It was January 27th, 2018, was the puck in the booth. And actually, I think the smudge mark is still on the wall to the right where I sit.
You'll have to send us the picture. We'll put it up in the video at this point, when this episode comes out. So right now we're talking to Matt Lipcsak, the TV and radio voice of the Phantoms. Now, we've been told by several people that the locker room this season is more tighter knit than it has been in the past couple years. Now, as much as you're around the guys, would you say that's accurate?
My interactions with the team are unfortunately very limited. I am a game day employee for better or for worse. That's kind of how it goes. I show up on game days, and I don't get much interaction with the guys, unfortunately, which does kind of take away from. I feel it takes away from the quality of my broadcast. Because you don't get to tell any of those little anecdotal stories about the guys of that time we were on the bus and the bus broke down and blah blah blah, or I was talking to so and so and they told me this great story about their mom. I don't get to do any of that stuff, but from what I have seen, and again, these are in very limited interactions, this is an amazing group of young men, and I'm very excited to see just how far they can go and what they will be able to accomplish as this season winds down through its final. What do we have? 17, 18 games left, and then hopefully on to the Clark Cup playoff.
Now, speaking of that, right now the Phantoms are in 5th place in the Eastern Conference. They're only 3 points behind Team USA for 3rd place. Now, we've seen in the past couple seasons the Phantoms have these late season surges that propel them up in the standings. Now, from your vantage point, in your opinion, does this season's team have the ability for a late season run?
Absolutely, they do. I think there's very, very little doubt in my mind that the Phantoms do have the ability to, I don't even want to say shock the world, because I don't think it's going to surprise everybody that if this team is able to put it all together, that they're going to, make a charge up the standings. And as I, pull up the remaining schedule, it certainly is going to be a tough hill to climb. All of our remaining opponents are in the playoffs right now. Looks like we're almost fairly evenly split between East and West. So, those points from the Western Conference games are super important, but that just puts an even greater focus on the games against the Eastern Conference teams. We still have two left against Green Bay. Those are huge because, obviously they're the team right ahead of us. We have two left against Muskegon. Those are huge because they're the team that, at least right now as we speak, are right behind us. Two games left against USA. Two against Dubuque, two against Cedar Rapids, who's also just a few points behind us. So yeah, these last few games are incredibly crucial for the Phantoms, and if we see defense and offense the way that the Phantoms played this past weekend against Muskegon, there's absolutely the potential to climb up the standings and see if they can't get into a 3 or a 4 spot and get a first round home series. Now, Team USA and Green Bay both have a couple of games in hand on the Phantoms, 2 for Green Bay and 3 for Team USA. But do the Phantoms have the potential? Absolutely they do. I don't doubt it for a second.
Now, when you look at Team USA right now, as far as their USHL play, they've been trending downwards. That's been kind of one of those things that's helped us to start catching up with them. Yeah, and definitely, you look at the schedule the next couple weeks. We have 2 games of Waterloo, which is, who's leading the Western Conference right now. Des Moines might be a little bit of a, cool off game between all of these. We have Chicago coming from the school day game next week. Yeah, trip up to Plymouth. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, especially the next couple weeks is going to be very telling about. In my mind, as far as what this team's going to, be able to accomplish the rest of this season.
And a little bit of news on Cedar Rapids. Apparently, their third goalie now is out for the season, so they're SOL.
the third goalie.
Yeah, they've lost.
Wow.
Yeah, and maybe their top scorer, I can't remember his name, Russian kid. I guess he went down.
Well, as I look at the Team USA schedule, it looks like the U18s play 11 of their remaining 22 games. So the remaining games on the season are going to be evenly split between the U18s and the U17s. The U18s actually have not played a USHL game since December the 13th. They're going to return to USHL action this weekend with 3-3 at home. They got Dubuque and then a pair against Cedar Rapids. As they've returned from international competition and they're going to try to catch up on their schedule. So yeah, 11 games remaining for the U18s, 11 games remaining for the U17s. U18s 11-2 on the season in USHL play. I haven't updated my U17 stats since looks like it's been almost exactly a month since the last time they were in Youngstown. But that just goes to show you that, hey, that they have the potential to absolutely pick up a ton of points here quickly. At that winning percentage, we'll just go ahead and call that 80%. U18s have 11 games left. They're probably going to win 9 of them. So that's 18 points right there.
When you're going through running numbers for like U17, U18, does it give you as much of a headache as it gives us week after week, it seems like?
No, actually, because I made my own Excel chart to separate the U17 from the U18 stats. Spreadsheets, my friend. You should see my line chart is actually a spreadsheet on Excel. Every player has their own. I'm going to geek out here about my spreadsheet because it took a lot of time for me to put it together. Every player has their own book, and then there's the main page. And so all I have to do, if the player played the game that night, I put a 1 in the games played column. If they scored a goal, put however many goals they scored. If they had an assist, I put however many assists that they scored. And then for the players that have been in the league for multiple years, I have, formulas that can just add everything together. So I've made some very nice spreadsheets, and, I took a lot of time on some of them. So I'm going to geek out on them for a second, and you can't stop me.
Yeah, Justin gets on me for that all the time. Justin's everything is done by computer. I do a lot by computer, but A lot of that kind of stuff. I'm old school. I have my notebook. I like to write everything out by hand. And yeah, he gets on me for that all the time.
And me, I'm trying to hack Hockey Tech's API to get access to the raw data.
Okay, so now, except for having to read names and numbers at the opposite end of the ice, you have a pretty envious view of these games. Now, you have Kuntar, Schoen, Ando, Gallagher, who get a good bit of attention. Is there any players or any player or players that you think should be talked about more than they are?
Oh, that's a good one. Let me take a look at the line chart, see what I can come up with for you. I mean, through the first 29 games of his USHL career, nobody's talking about Georgi Merkulov yet, and they absolutely should be. Outside of Youngstown, nobody's talking about Georgi. Or I guess Goja is what he answers to on the bench, is what Coach Nick told me. But people are going to talk about Georgi Merkulov because he's been put on a show so far, absolutely. I don't think John Beaton gets the attention that he deserves either. And I've been very impressed with Caleb Price as well through the first, 15, 20 games that he's played for the Phantoms.
Yeah. And yeah, we both have to agree, I think, on Merkulov and Beaton. Merkulov was outstanding the first game he came in.
Yeah, let me see, because I've got my spreadsheet right here. Goal and assist for Georgie against Team USA on November the 16th. And of course, something like that, when I get a text message from Brad with a line chart, and I'm like, who's Merkulov? Who is that? And then I get a link to a elite prospects page. Oh, okay.
That's basically the reason why I'm here. Is I got sick of seeing that stuff, and it's. I mean, to give you a good example, there was one day I'm sitting there, I show up at a game, and I'm like, who the heck is Kiefer Sherwood? And, the rest on that was history.
I was going to say Kiefer Sherwood, only the best power play one-timer in Youngstown Phantoms history. And if you want to argue that with me, I will fight you in the middle of Front Street, because I don't think there's any debating that point.
Yeah, I'll be back to back with you because, yeah, he was pretty much automatic from that one side.
Yeah, left dot, one-timer. Good luck stopping him.
Yep.
All right, Matt. So to finish this up, someday the Phantoms will win the Clark Cup. Hopefully sooner than later. Now, have you ever thought about what you would say at that point when the clock hits zero, or do you think you'll just be in the moment when that time comes?
I would like to think that I will be in the moment. I know the year that the Phantoms, didn't qualify for the playoffs until the last game of the season. I believe that was actually the year that. Well, no, it wasn't the year they won the Clark Cup. It was the year that they my first year against Chicago, so it would have been 16-17. I did think a little bit about that beforehand, but because I was able to plan for it, I knew it was coming. The Clark Cup, you might not know till the day before or the night before, that, hey, this is a very real possibility that could happen. Obviously, when the team made the Clark Cup finals a couple of years ago, gosh, I heard it said outside the locker room that, you can't plan for luck. And, there were two teams that were just so evenly matched, but Fargo just got 3 bounces in that series, and 3 bounces of the puck, and that got them, a trophy and some jewelry. And
there were a couple former Phantoms involved in that one.
we do not need to discuss Griffin Loughran's and Ty Farmer's role in that series. Okay, we don't.
I was just saying, things come back to bite us.
Griffin Loughran, by the way, having an amazing season right now at college hockey, I do believe. 7th in the NCAA in scoring with 36 points.
Yeah, but he won a cup with Fargo, so we're just going to leave it at that.
Yeah, he did, and I know and since he's no longer with the team, I don't feel bad sharing this. I know Jason Kohler wasn't happy about trading him away, but it was what it was when we sent him back to the NAHL, and he found a home after bouncing around to a couple teams, and unfortunately, it was with the Fargo Force.
All right, so we've been talking to Matt Lipcsak, the voice of the Youngstown Phantoms. You can hear Matt every home game on Hockey TV, Western Reserve Radio. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We definitely hope to have you back again in the future. And just to throw a little cheese on the end of this, do you want to give us maybe like a post-goal catchphrase to take us out of here?
Oh, I was going to give you the sign-off phrase is what I was going to give you.
Whatever you want to do, roll with it.
Justin, Sam, thank you so much for having me here on the Dump and Chase podcast. I would be happy to join you again anytime. So for my compatriots, Justin Irwin and Sam Olsted, this is Voice of the Phantoms, Matt Lipcsak, signing off. We'll catch you next time. Sound out. Fade to black.
For this week's Phantom player profile, we're going to take a look at defenseman Artyom Borshyov. He is a 6'3", 2000 birth year from Belarus, making him the second Belarusian on a Phantoms roster in as many years, following Ivan Kolvikov. Artyom spent the last couple seasons with the Northern Cyclones of the National Collegiate Development Conference, putting up 11 goals and 47 assists in 80 games. He was a 17th round Phase 2 pick by Tri-City last season, playing 10 games with the Storm. He re-entered the draft this season and was taken in the 15th round by the Phantoms. He has played all but 2 games this season, the 2 being the suspension from the Dubuque series. In 41 games, he has 5 goals and 11 assists, and honestly, in my opinion, I don't know about yours, but to me, he's been one of the more consistent blue liners this season.
Yeah, he holds his own in his own end for sure, and he contributes, quite a bit on offense too, at times, so... Yeah, and he's been a real surprise on both ends of the puck coming into his first year with the Phantoms.
Borshyov is committed to my favorite university to pronounce, Quinnipiac. You know what? From now on, I'm just going to refer to it as the Q.
Yeah, you're good enough. Quinnipiac is pretty close.
No, it's the Q.
Yeah.
From now on, it's the Q. This kid is an incredibly hard worker. The sky's the limit for him. And most definitely, he's going on to do great things. The Q is going to have a really good player coming to them next year.
Yeah. He's come up, he's worked his way, comes over here, plays youth hockey from Belarus, works his way up from, we'll call the NCDC Tier 3, gets his chance, and he's making the most of it. He's competed from day one. So,
the Phantoms are back on the road this weekend. On Friday, they take on the Western Conference leading Waterloo Blackhawks. They then travel to Des Moines on Saturday. Now, Des Moines is currently 7th in the West, and they have been trending downward in the past couple weeks, losing 4 straight games by a combined score of 21-7. And I will throw in this coming Wednesday, since we'll record next week after this game, in which Chicago will be coming to town for the school day game. Next week, we finish up with a trip to Plymouth and a visit from Waterloo. As far as the standings are concerned, the next couple of weeks are going to be very interesting for the Phantoms.
Yeah, that pair of games against Waterloo, that's going to be pretty rough. I alluded earlier, about goalies possibly stealing us a point or two at times. I think we're going to need it against Waterloo. Definitely a really good team. Stellar goaltending. We'll see how that goes. Des Moines, they're trending down, but don't look down on them. Don't underestimate them. They still are that far behind us, points wise. So
okay, so we're coming down to the end of the episode, which means it's time for 2 questions. So Justin, my question for you: last season, in the last couple months, we saw Ben Schoen go from being a good player to, quite frankly, a great player. So who on this season's roster do you think could make that leap?
Easily Riley Funk. I think he's got the physical assets. He's got the energy. It seems like he's just one of those guys who might be gripping a stick a little too tight, a little bit snake bitten. I think going down the stretch, if he starts feeling it, he'll probably wreck some teams' defenses. All right, so my question to you: you're the stats guy. You say you like to do the stats.
I like to think I am.
Yeah. And again, I appreciate it. It helps me out a ton. What I want to know is what stat has been the biggest surprise, biggest tell, biggest, what has stood out to you just statistically?
For that, you know what? I'm going to go back to about a month or so ago, maybe a month and a half ago. You had asked me to look up the stats for what like the Phantoms' record has been, what their goals per game has been when you have Trevor Kuntar in the lineup versus when you don't have him in the lineup. And the numbers, I haven't updated them since then, but I believe at the time it was the Phantoms were like 5-1 without him in the lineup. And the goals per game when he was playing was like 3.5. It was only like 1.5 when he wasn't in the lineup. To me, that was very indicative of how the season had gone up to that point where it seemed like he was more a spotlight for the offense than really anybody else had been. Just that alone. I mean, just 2 goals per game higher when he's in versus when he's not. To me, that was extremely telling up to that point in the season. Like we talked about earlier, now you're starting to see these other guys, they're getting on the score sheet, they're contributing, in the offensive zone. We're seeing them putting more pucks in the net. So I think that issue isn't so much an issue anymore from what we've seen in the past month or so. But yeah, up to that point, yeah, that when I saw those numbers for the first time, that really kind of knocked me out of my chair.
Shut up and sit down.
Yeah. I've been asked a couple times about that in our about that intro music, why it's in there. You had sent me that song, and I heard that part, and that for some reason in my head, I'm like, you know what? Anybody who sits behind us, that's what they're wishing they could probably say to us every single game. So when I heard that, it kind of made me laugh, and it's like, yeah, that's got to be in there. Yeah, that's to me that's us to a T, having that in the intro. So I've been asked that a couple times. If anybody's been ever wondering about the sit down and shut up at the beginning of the show, that's to me that's what it signifies to me. But yeah, so as far as this episode, where you've come to the end, that's all the time we have. Thank you for spending some time with us this week. The Dump and Chase podcast is brought to you by hockeyfan.com, where you can find all of Justin's in-depth blogs on the week-to-week goings of the Phantoms. You can also check us out under the Phantoms section on ohiohockeydigest.com. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, leave a comment below. Our social media links are in the description, and you can find us every home game at the bottom of section 222. So, until next week, let's do that hockey.